Before the pyramids pierced the skies, before the pharaohs ruled with godlike power, there was a man, a name whispered through legend and carved into the foundations of history. He united two lands, forged a kingdom, and became the first to wear the crown of a nation that would shape the ancient world. His name was Mina, or was it Narmer, or something greater still? Join us as we journey back over 5,000 years to uncover the truth behind the man who built Egypt, the eternal Pharaoh. Long before the pyramids rose from the desert sands, before the pharaohs etched their legacies in stone, and before the Nile Valley became the cradle of one of the world's greatest civilizations, there existed a land divided. Ancient Egypt, in its earliest chapters, was not one nation, but two distinct regions, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. These regions, though both nurtured by the life-giving waters of the Nile, were worlds apart in their customs, leadership, deities, and ways of life. For centuries, these lands coexisted in a state of political fragmentation and regional rivalry. Amid this fragmented landscape emerged a name shrouded in both legend and historical intrigue: King Mina, also known as Menes. He is celebrated as the first pharaoh of a unified Egypt, the sovereign who forged two lands into one and laid the cornerstone for a civilization that would endure for millennia. To the ancient Egyptians, Mina was more than a king. He was a symbol of divine order, a bridge between gods and men, and the very embodiment of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE was not merely a political event. It was a transformational moment in human history. It marked the beginning of the dynastic period and the birth of the pharaonic state, a centralized kingdom that would influence art, architecture, religion, and governance across the ancient world. This documentary seeks to uncover the story of King Mina, not just through the lens of legend, but through the fragments of history, archaeology, and scholarly debate. Who was he? What challenges did he overcome? And why does his story still captivate the imagination over 5,000 years later? By exploring the history, myth, and legacy of this enigmatic ruler, we journey back to the dawn of Egypt, to the moment when two lands became one and a civilization was born. Long before the first pharaoh wore the double crown, the land of Egypt was a mosaic of cultures, kingdoms, and competing tribal communities. This era, known as pre-dynastic Egypt, circa 5500 to 3100 BCE, was a time of experimentation, innovation, and growing complexity. While today we often think of Egypt as a unified nation along the Nile, in its early stages, it was divided into two distinct realms: Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north, each with its own identity. Upper Egypt stretched from the southern cataracts of the Nile to the region around modern-day Memphis. It was a narrow valley hemmed in by desert cliffs, where early communities began to flourish thanks to the seasonal flooding of the river. These southern inhabitants developed strong agricultural traditions, religious beliefs centered around gods like Nekbet, and warlike tendencies that encouraged the rise of powerful chiefdoms such as Thinis, Nakata, and Hierakonpolis. In contrast, Lower Egypt occupied the broad, fertile delta to the north, where the Nile fans out into many branches before reaching the Mediterranean Sea. The abundance of resources here supported denser populations, greater diversity, and early urban development. Lower Egypt's people worshipped gods like Wadjet, and their culture emphasized trade, craft production, and localized rule. Despite the river's unity, these two regions developed separately, often clashing in skirmishes or vying for dominance. Each had its own ruling elite, religious symbols, and crowns. The white crown, Hedjet, for Upper Egypt, and the red crown, Deshret, for Lower Egypt. These crowns would later be merged into the Shent, symbolizing the unification achieved under Mina's rule. By the late pre-dynastic period, three major city-states, Thinis, Nakada, and Hierakonpolis, began to emerge as centers of power in the south. These early proto-kingdoms developed complex social structures, religious institutions, and military capabilities, setting the stage for larger political ambitions. Through all of this, the Nile River remained the unifying thread. Its predictable flooding enabled agriculture and stability, while its navigability connected distant regions and encouraged exchange. The river not only shaped the economy, but also the very world-view of the Egyptian people, who came to see the Nile as the axis of the universe. As these societies matured, the idea of unification, of one ruler, one kingdom, one divine order, grew ever more attractive. And in this fertile, competitive, and spiritually charged environment, a leader would rise, one whose ambition and legacy would forever change the course of Egyptian history. The identity of King Mina, also referred to by the Greeks as Menes, is one of ancient Egypt's most enduring enigmas. Revered by early Egyptian chroniclers and later Greek historians as the founder of the first dynasty and the unifier of Upper and Lower Egypt, Mina stands as a semi-mythical figure at the crossroads of history and legend. Yet modern archaeology and scholarship suggest that the story of this great king is more complex than the simple tale passed down through the centuries. According to ancient Egyptian sources like Manetho, a 3rd century BCE priest and historian, Menes was the first human king to rule a unified Egypt. He was said to have reigned for over 60 years and met a dramatic end, attacked by a hippopotamus while hunting. Greek historians like Herodotus also mention Menes as a cultural hero who built the city of Memphis, diverted the Nile to do so, and laid the foundation for Egypt's dynastic rule. However, contemporary evidence paints a more layered picture. Chief among the archaeological clues is the Narmer palette, an intricately carved siltstone tablet discovered in Hierakonpolis, one of the key cities of pre-dynastic Upper Egypt. This ceremonial artifact, dating to around 3100 BCE, depicts a powerful king, identified as Narmer, wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. On one side, he is shown striking down an enemy, symbolizing conquest. On the other, he parades in a scene of celebration, suggesting political consolidation. This has led many Egyptologists to propose that Narmer and Menes are either the same individual or closely related figures, possibly father and son. Another possibility is that Hor-Aha, Narmer's successor, may have been the historical Menes, continuing the unification begun by his predecessor. Some scholars even argue that Mina is not a name at all, but a title, meaning he who endures, passed down or symbolically attributed to the dynasty's founder. Despite the uncertainty, most experts agree that the process of unification took place around 3100 BCE, marking the transition from the pre-dynastic period to the early dynastic period. This was a time of dynamic change, marked by military campaigns, shifting alliances, and the centralization of power in the hands of a single ruler. As the first true pharaoh, King Mina, or the composite figure he represents, likely began his rule in Upper Egypt, perhaps from the city of Thinis, near Abydos. From there, he extended his influence northward, eventually conquering Lower Egypt. This campaign may have involved both force and diplomacy, as well as the use of religious symbolism to legitimize his rule. Once in control of both regions, Mina's early reign was focused on consolidating power, building a centralized administration, and integrating the beliefs, laws, and cultures of the once divided lands. This was no small feat. He would need to win the loyalty of local leaders, standardize religious practices, and manage a vast territory with limited communication tools. Thus, whether he was Narmer, Hor-Aha, or a mythologized fusion of both, King Mina emerged as the founding figure of ancient Egyptian civilization, a leader whose legacy endured through 30 dynasties and over 3 millennia. The story of the unification of Egypt under King Mina has been told in many ways, through myth, royal inscriptions, temple carvings, and scholarly reconstructions. What remains consistent across all accounts is its profound significance. This moment of unification laid the foundation for the world's first great nation-state and introduced the concept of divine kingship that would shape Egyptian society for thousands of years. The traditional tale speaks of a mighty war between Upper and Lower Egypt. King Mina, ruling from the south, marched his armies north to conquer the fragmented and wealthier Delta region. While the historical accuracy of a single sweeping war is debated, the narmer palette strongly suggests a military campaign, showcasing scenes of conquest and submission. Yet unification was not solely achieved by violence. Diplomacy, marriage alliances, and religious integration also played key roles in bringing the two lands together under one crown.
The symbolism of unification is embedded deeply in Egyptian iconography. The white crown, Hedjet of Upper Egypt, and the red crown, Deshret of Lower Egypt, were combined into the Shent, or double crown. This striking headpiece, worn by all subsequent pharaohs, represented the king's dominion over both lands and his divine responsibility to maintain balance and order, ma'at, across the kingdom.
But unification was only the beginning. Mina initiated sweeping administrative reforms that would define Egyptian governance for centuries. He likely organized a bureaucracy with scribes, tax collectors, and provincial governors. These officials helped manage resources, oversee agriculture, and ensure loyalty to the central throne. The development of hieroglyphic writing also advanced during this time, enabling record-keeping, law-making, and royal propaganda. Religiously, Mina merged the deities and traditions of the north and south, promoting a national pantheon that included both Horus, the falcon god of Upper Egypt, and Seth, the deity of Lower Egypt. In doing so, he laid the groundwork for a cohesive religious ideology that bound the population together under one cosmic order. Through unification, Mina transformed Egypt from a patchwork of warring tribes into a centralized, stable kingdom. This achievement allowed for the monumental developments to come: pyramids, temples, international trade, and artistic flourishing. More than a political maneuver, unification was a civilizational leap that propelled Egypt into its golden age. With Egypt unified under a single ruler, King Mina set about constructing the administrative and religious framework that would define pharaonic rule for millennia. The dawn of the early dynastic period marked not only a political unification, but also the emergence of a divine kingship, wherein the pharaoh was not merely a political leader, but the earthly embodiment of the gods. Mina's rule established the template of the pharaoh as a divine ruler, a living god who maintained harmony and cosmic order, ma'at, on behalf of the deities. This concept was crucial in legitimizing his power across the formerly divided lands. The divine authority of the king was reinforced through religious rituals, temple construction, and visual propaganda, carved in stone and depicted in ceremonial artifacts like the narmer palette. One of Mina's most lasting accomplishments was the integration of religious systems from Upper and Lower Egypt. He upheld the worship of deities from both regions, thereby uniting their spiritual identities. Horus, the falcon-headed god and patron of kingship, became central to the royal ideology. The pharaohs were often called the living Horus, while other deities such as Seth, Neith, and Ptah were incorporated into the expanding religious framework to create a national pantheon. To support governance and manage the expanding kingdom, Mina likely developed an early bureaucratic system. Regional governors, known as nomarchs, administered Egypt's various districts or nomes. These officials collected taxes, mostly in the form of grain, and maintained local order while remaining loyal to the central government. Crucial to this bureaucratic expansion was the emergence of writing, specifically hieroglyphs. Though early writing systems existed before unification, it was during and after Mina's reign that writing became an essential tool of administration, allowing officials to record royal decrees, census data, temple donations, and historical events. The earliest examples of scribal activity can be seen on pottery, ivory tags, and tomb walls, signaling the beginning of Egypt's literate state. Art and architecture also flourished under Mina. Temples were constructed as centers of both worship and economic activity, and artistic styles became more standardized to reflect a unified cultural identity. Art began to depict the pharaoh as a dominant figure, larger, more adorned, and surrounded by symbols of power and divinity. Through these foundational systems, governance, religion, bureaucracy, and culture, King Mina shaped not only the future of Egypt, but also established a model of statecraft that would influence the ancient world for centuries to come. King Mina's legacy, though shrouded in myth and speculation, is indisputable in its impact on ancient Egyptian civilization. As the reputed first pharaoh of a unified Egypt, his story became the cornerstone of Egypt's national identity, told and retold across dynasties and centuries. Egyptian priest Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BCE, famously listed Menes as the first human king of Egypt in his dynastic histories. He attributed to him the founding of Memphis and a reign lasting over 6 decades. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing even earlier, echoed many of these claims and further romanticized Mina as a semi-divine hero. Over time, Mina became a symbol of unity, leadership, and divine favor, enshrined in cultural memory and religious tradition. His greatest contribution was undoubtedly the establishment of a centralized Egyptian state, one that endured for over 3,000 years. This model of governance, rooted in divine kingship, religious integration, and bureaucratic order, allowed Egypt to become one of the most stable and culturally rich civilizations in human history. Every pharaoh who followed, whether Ramses, Akhenaten, or Cleopatra, owed their position to the precedent set by Mina. However, the historical accuracy of Mina's identity remains a subject of intense scholarly debate. Was he a real individual, or a legendary figure constructed to personify the unification process? Many Egyptologists believe Narmer was the true unifier, pointing to the Narmer palette as concrete evidence. Others argue that Hor-Aha, Narmer's successor, was the actual Menes. A third theory posits that Menes was not a name but a dynastic title, used to glorify the achievements of the early kings. These debates are further complicated by the scarcity of written records from that era. Much of what we know comes from archaeological artifacts, many of which are open to interpretation. As excavations continue, new findings may reshape our understanding. In recent decades, discoveries in Abydos, Saqqara, and the Delta region have provided clues that could one day unravel the full story of Egypt's unification. Despite the uncertainties, one thing is clear. King Mina's legend serves as a foundational myth that encapsulates the origins of Egyptian civilization. Whether real, symbolic, or a fusion of multiple historical figures, he remains a towering icon, the first link in a chain of kings that would stretch across 3 millennia. King Mina, whether remembered as a real ruler, a legendary figure, or a blend of both, stands as a monumental force in the birth of ancient Egyptian civilization. His unification of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE marks not just the beginning of a centralized state, but the genesis of a cultural and political legacy that would endure for more than 3,000 years. Through strategic governance, religious consolidation, and symbolic acts, like the wearing of the double crown and the founding of Memphis, Mina helped lay the groundwork for the pharaonic ideology that defined Egypt's golden age. The systems he initiated, writing, bureaucracy, temple economy, and the myth of divine kingship, would guide countless rulers after him and shape one of the most iconic civilizations in human history. Yet the story of Mina also serves as a reflection of how legend and history intertwine. Ancient sources like Manetho and Herodotus offer grand tales of his rule, often blurred by the passage of time and the intentions of later dynasties to glorify their origins. The debate over his true identity, Narmer, Hor-Aha, or a symbolic amalgamation, reminds us of the mysteries that still lie buried beneath Egypt's sands. In the modern world, King Mina remains more than a historical figure. He is a symbol of unity, strength, and divine authority. His myth endures not only in textbooks and temples, but in the collective imagination of a civilization that continues to captivate the world. As we uncover more pieces of Egypt's ancient puzzle, Mina's legacy lives on, timeless, powerful and eternal.